As supporters of democracy, at a time when democracy itself is under threat from multiple directions, it came to our attention that in the run-up to, and during the 2022 Northern Ireland elections, there have been a number of accusations that the Northern Ireland British Broadcasting Corporation is both politically and religiously biased in its reporting against the loyalist political parties and population in Northern Ireland. As the British Broadcasting Corporation prides itself on its impartial news and current affairs coverage around the world, this is an extremely serious accusation, so it is very surprising and quite concerning that when the accusations were made live on air, the presenters just dismissed them, quickly changing the topic. Northern Ireland is a province that has regulations forcing dual political decision-making, to avoid even the possibility, or perception of discrimination or bias. You would imagine therefore that great care would be taken by all broadcasters in the province, ensuring that their presenters also represented both sections of the community equally during production. We decided to focus on the two most recent accusations, which were both directed at Mark Carruthers, one in The View, and the other in Vote 22NI. Mark Carruthers comes from a nationalist or Republican background, was born in Derry, or Londonderry depending on your loyalties, and has a degree in political sciences and Irish politics. His political affiliations will be generally interpreted as nationalist at least. The following video is Jim Allister making the complaint of political bias, on The View, a political television programme on BBC Northern Ireland.
All you have in this interview, Mark, is, from your perspective, an opportunity to deride, to demean TUV and the people who vote for us. Now, if you think that isn't sending, if you think that, sorry, no, if you think that, if you think that isn't sending, if you think that isn't sending a very clear message that you and the BBC are in the business of trying to demean the people.
With this obvious perception of his cultural predisposition, and working for the BBC, you would think that he would take particular care to treat members of the loyalist community fairly. When we looked at the interview where the first accusation of bias was made, by TUV leader Jim Allister, it is clear by the end, that the two candidates interviewed in the episode were treated very differently. The interview with Jim Allister was argumentative and confrontational, even questioning and mocking his right to stand for election, at one point even smugly grinning as Mr. Allister protested. Democracy depends on every citizen's rights to stand for election in pursuit of their rights. For someone with a degree in political sciences to publicly mock this right is nothing less than dangerous, particularly when it could be perceived that he personally would have opposing views and a vested interest in discrediting Mr. Allister. In a country with a divided society, treading the tightrope between violence and democracy, the BBC should go to that naughty corner Mr. Carruthers is so fond of suggesting that the Northern Ireland opposition parties reside in. That means largely the smaller Unionist parties. The interview held prior to Mr. Allister's, with SDLP candidate, Colin Eastwood, was in contrast. Professional, polite, business-like and focusing solely on challenging SDLP policies, thankfully, mentioning but not dwelling on the party's declining fortunes and history or suggesting that he retire from politics. This could obviously be personal animosity towards Mr. Allister, but it does justify the accusation of bias, and opens up the very real interpretation that it was on political or religious grounds. In the Vote 22NI election programme, shortly after the interview with Mr. Jim Allister, a supporting accusation of media bias was also made in episode 6 of that series by one of the panelists, Mr. Lee Reynolds, a former member of the DUP, to Mark Carruthers, and Enda McLafferty. Enda is the political editor of BBC NI, born in Letterkenny and a resident of Donegal in the Irish Republic. In his comments Mr. Lee Reynolds defended the TUV by pointing out that there had been a media conspiracy to downplay the loyalist opposition to the protocol, which was at the centre of the TUV political campaign. Unfortunately the video was withdrawn early from the BBC website before it could be copied and reproduced here. Following is a low-quality copy of the comments from Mr. Lee Reynolds.
Strategy, but it's also, I think it's a good demonstration. There's been a bit of a concerted campaign in the media to dismiss the importance or the impact of the protocol amongst Unionists and amongst Unionist voters. That direct correlation between those two figures shows it did have real electoral power.
As the two presenters come from a nationalist background, you can already see a serious disconnect starting to develop with the loyalist community. The two presenters control the direction and fairness of the program content and are able to block the direction of travel of the conversation, should it suit them. While the two presenters obviously have negligible insight, or interest, in the loyalist mindset, and are at least sympathetic with the Republican worldview, we can hope that the rest of the panel make up for the lack of balance in the presenters, as they are in the perfect position to lead the discussion, or place the emphasis in any direction they want. The rest of the panel consist of Michelle Gildernew, a member of Sinn Féin, a Republican party with a very violent history. Gavin Robinson, DUP MP, Loyalist Party. Claire Hans, SDLP, Nationalist Party. Danny Kennedy, UUP, Moderate Loyalist Party. Professor Jonathan Tonge, a Liverpool academic. I think it's fair to say that the panel was very heavily biased against the Unionist viewpoint. Not only were there 4 nationalist, or Republican participants and only 2 with a loyalist perspective, but all control of the show's direction and content were in the hands of the nationalist. It would be interesting to see the reaction if the imbalance had been the other way around. I suspect there would be indignant outrage from the same people on the panel. The BBC have a responsibility to ensure their programs have balance. No matter how well-meaning a presenter may be, he cannot represent a mindset he does not have. Though this attitude does raise the very important question of how far up the BBC hierarchy this imbalance goes. The BBC is already in trouble in England for a left-wing imbalance in its political presenting personnel, and has given notice that it is planning to decentralise its network to restore balance outside London. Getting the balance wrong in England will cause annoyance. In Northern Ireland it could cost lives. There were other incidents in other episodes of Vote 22NI where Mark Carruthers became argumentative and aggressive with loyalist representatives, also allowing a substitute, Sinn Féin leader to take part in the programme, that would cause serious offence to Unionist and cause a bad atmosphere for the discussions. The questions and response a Unionist would have is entirely different from someone raised in a nationalist environment, let alone a Republican one. Northern Ireland, or as Republicans would say the North of Ireland, deserves a media and television service that serves everyone in an open and transparent manner, just like their political system was designed to do. Democracy is very precious to every citizen, and under threat around the world. The first stage in this destruction is the manipulation of its media and the information being delivered, or in some cases, misinformation drip-fed to its citizens, by corrupt public service broadcasting. The BBC, a public service broadcasting corporation, seem to be of the opinion that while politicians cannot be trusted to execute their duties to ensure minority input impartially without legal safeguards, their journalists can be trusted to represent people in their programs that have beliefs and life experiences that are diametrically opposed to theirs. It is ridiculous that the new majority make the same mistakes as the old. Everyone is entitled to be heard, but should it be found out that a deliberate campaign to influence election results was orchestrated by the BBC, Northern Ireland, the validity of the election itself could be put into question. Replacing one injustice with another is obscene, no matter how it evolved. As a result of this short investigation, we have discovered enough evidence to make it worthwhile to investigate further on how far-reaching this bias has reached in BBC. There seems to be a massive overrepresentation of Irish news correspondents involved as contributors and correspondents. The logic involved in putting employees of nationalist newspapers up as a Unionist contributor, for example, is quite baffling. Are there no Unionists out there without financial influences from the opposition, or could that, possibly, be the criteria for a Unionist getting the job?